Talking to myself again. But it's the only...
Good afternoon and welcome along to NUFC Matters, a special edition because we weren't going to have a show today. We're going to have a day off, but after we saw the fallout on social media last night, we had a bit of a chat and thought, yeah, we better do one because I think everybody needs a little bit of therapy after their Sunday dinner today. And the question really is, all about Steve Bruce. And we've stuck a little thing up on our Facebook page. If you join NUFC Matters Facebook page, Daz came up with the idea last night of asking, what would you do in Steve Bruce's position? You've got 5 games to go. You've got 5 games to save your managerial career at Newcastle. What would you do? So if you want to interact on the Facebook page, join the Facebook page, and we'll read a few of those comments out later. As always, we'll have everybody on in the chat, and we will stick your comments up on screen and see where we go. But yeah, it's almost 20 hours since the game finished. Chris, how are you feeling after that about Steve Bruce at Newcastle United? There's been a big call on social media for him to lose his job. Are you one of those who feels that way?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. I don't think it'll happen in a week or two. I say if Newcastle's in the danger zone headed into the festive period, let's say mid-December, Christmas time, then he could face a sack. But I think the question is, we need to have clarity from Mike Ashley needs to have clarity on whether he's going to be able to sell the club before he gets rid of Bruce, because who are you going to bring in the interim? You're not going to be able to hire the next manager, post takeover to replace Bruce. So there have to be some sort of stopgap, and would that stopgap person be able to keep Newcastle up? So that's my question. Unclear.
Okay, Neil Straker says, has anybody actually mentioned the players have to take some responsibility as well? I don't see anyone saying that. It's all directed at Bruce. You just can't blame it all 100% on the manager. That was the line that Alan Shearer took on Match of the Day last night when he was commenting after the highlights, or should I say the lowlights. And he essentially said that the players have to take the blame as well as Steve Bruce. It's the first time I've heard him really be critical of Bruce over the last few weeks, and yeah, it's certainly something which we'll have to take into consideration. Andre, good afternoon. You've got the stats, and you've got the stats, Andre, as always. I did find this one on Match of the Day rather interesting. This is our formation on average for every game this season, and as you can see, nobody in the attack zone. And I think Chris mentioned it before we came on air. It's a bit like watching a schoolboys game. Everyone just crowded in the middle, and nobody any idea of how to go forward. And it's just a mess. It's like schoolboys football. But I think you've been reading the Athletic article, and you've got some interesting stats to share with us.
Yes, hi to everyone. Yeah, exactly. I think this is what you showed actually is the issue with Newcastle these days, because the points and after 9 games, let's say, it's acceptable, and it's more or less what we expected. And even the position in the table, it's what we expected. Like the average position since Mike Ashley took over in Newcastle, average position in the Premier League for Newcastle is 13th. So basically what we see today, it's pretty much in line with what's been happening for 13 years. But what's happening on the pitch is actually alarming. And I think that there needs to be a change. I think Bruce has to go, because Newcastle today has no shape, has no style. I don't think any of us can explain what type of football actually Newcastle are playing these days. Like, they're defending very deep, and they're not a good counter-attacking side. So basically, and they play some long balls, so they sit very deep, and they play long balls, and nothing's happening on the pitch, and it's very, very painful to watch. And the statistics that I came across, as you know, football is pretty scientific these days, and a lot of people do a lot of analysis. Great job by the Athletic, and I think Tom Warville is the chief analyst there. Like, Newcastle these days are bottom in the table for shots, like 8 shots per game. Bottom 19th in the table on shots on target. Ball possession in the final third, 29%. Basically, Newcastle don't keep the ball in front of the goal of the opposition, and we see this when we watch the game. 29% is the lowest in the league. Last season, Newcastle were 19th. Only Norwich was worse in this department. Basically, another very telling stat. It's Newcastle allowed the opposition to pass the ball 21 times before they attempt a tackle or interception, which is the worst in the Premier League for the past 5 years and worst in Europe this season. And finally, I was looking at the fact that last season, at least Newcastle was a good counter-attacking side, with Almiron and Saint-Maximin having some very good games. And last season, Newcastle were third in speed of counter-attack. It's measured like meters per second. This season, there is a decline also in this department. Newcastle dropped from third last season to 12th this season. So basically, whatever worked last season is getting worse, and whatever didn't work last season is not working this season. And I think that Bruce already had like 1.5 years, and he couldn't actually work with the team for 18 months. I think that if there's anyone in Newcastle with responsibility, and Lee Charnley is the director and he's paid good money to take decisions, I think they need to take a decision now. Because it will be too late, like when they brought Rafa in and McQuarrie stood until March. We all know what happened. So they need to take the decision now. Otherwise, I think that we'll be in deep trouble come the second half of the season.
Yeah, another interesting stat that I picked up, and this has probably done the rounds before, but it's Steve Bruce's managerial career. Sheffield United, 11 months, won 40%, resigned. Huddersfield, 17 months, won 37.9%, sacked. Wigan, 2 months, won 37.5%, resigned. Crystal Palace, 5 months, won 61.1%, resigned. Birmingham City, 6 years, promoted, relegated, promoted, win rate 37%, resigned. Wigan, 18 months, won 33.8%, resigned. I think did win the FA Cup then. Sunderland, 2 years, 6 months, win rate was 29.6%, sacked. Hull City, 4 years, 2 months, promoted, FA Cup runners-up, relegated, promoted, won 40.85%, resigned. Aston Villa, 2 years, won 45.1%, sacked. Sheffield Wednesday, 5 months, 38.9%, resigned. Newcastle, the one we're all really concerned about, and look at that percentage. 1 year, 5 months, win rate 33.3%, and that really is only lower than what? Well, the Wigan 18 months was 33.8, Newcastle 33.3, and then going a little bit further up, Huddersfield 37.8. Wow.
Only Sunderland betters it.
Only Sunderland betters it, which is probably no surprise to our viewers. So yeah, not great, Andre. Not great at all. Daz, you've gone with your green screen there, mate, and it's let's see what it says. There we go.
I think the message is clear. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve as Chris moves to the other side of his screen to make sure he's not under the badge. But yeah, I mean, look, tell us how you feel, Daz, after yesterday.
Yeah, look, look at it's not just after yesterday, Steve. To tell you the truth, like I only saw bits of the match yesterday, and I'm probably glad I that's all I saw really. It's just I think this my piece here might turn into a bit of a Steve Hasty rant, so I apologize in advance. Look, we can't do anything about yesterday, and I knew we were going to get beaten by Chelsea. I think everyone did, but this is not about just yesterday's game. It's about this last year, and even before he even came in, and I didn't want him there in the first place. But look, we are where we are. What can we do about it? And I'm going to launch into the next 5 games. And what you mentioned about the Facebook page idea. Look, he has to switch the system now and plan for the next 5 games. We have to play Palace, Villa, West Brom, Leeds, and Fulham. And in between the West Brom and the Leeds game, there's 2 days. And in between the Leeds and the Fulham game, there's 3 days. He has to switch the system, as I said. And I think he should go with a 4-3-3. And start with he's going to have to manage the players as well, because there's going to be need to be a bit of rotation. Gone is that 5 at the back now. That day's gone. We had difficult games. These games are winnable. He's not going to get 15 points. That's what he should be targeting, but he's not going to get them. He should be aiming for something like 10, 12 points. If he doesn't get 10 points, actually get rid of him. Then we've got players coming back as well. We've got Fraser and Wilson coming back potentially for the next game. We've got Gale and Dubravka as well, so we can mix things about, rotate it, keep it fresh. Also, I want to see us attack from the start. None of this sitting back. Use Carroll to come on for the last 15-20 minutes if we're required. If we go with the 4-3-3 and we go 1-0 down, switch it up to 4-4-2 and go with 2 strikers. Then and if you play shit in one game, you're off. I don't care who you are. If St. Maximum or anyone, you're off. And you get someone else, fight for your place. Then I mentioned the games that we're going to have to switch it up because the games are close together. Bring in youth. I haven't seen Elliot Anderson play, but I hear good things about him. Put him on the bench. But then blood him. If let's say if we do go 2-0 up in one game, give him some game time. Then by the end of those 5 games run, he could maybe start a game. And even if the worst came to the worst, and we lost all those 5 games, at least we have something out of it. We've blooded a youth player and we've given him a chance. And that's my rant over for now, Steve.
Very good rant, mate. Very good rant. All good points, well made, and lots of comments coming in. We'll just stick them on the screen as we go to Pete. Pete obviously sat with us and covered the game yesterday afternoon. What's your views on the Bruce situation? As always, plenty to say on social media, our support, and a lot of it was Bruce out, and that was the trending hashtag in Newcastle last night.
And deservedly so. I think fans have had enough. Newcastle fans have had enough of seeing the same unentertaining, boring football week after week after week, win, lose or draw. We've just had enough of it. And look, I'm never really one to sort of get on managers' backs or players' backs. When they're on the pitch or when it's game time, you get behind them and you want us to get the 3 points. But I think we've just had enough, and we can already foresee what's going to happen as the season's going to go on. And obviously, Andre's already put some stats out there which prove that we're really only going in one direction at the moment, and we have to stop that negative flow. And I believe the first and foremost, it starts with the manager. I know the players are to blame to a certain extent, and our club legend last night made it very, very clear that some of the players are not doing what they should be doing. And I completely agree with that. But it always starts with the manager. The manager is the leader of the club, of the dressing room. He decides who plays. He decides what system we play. He decides how we play. He's the focal point, so he needs to take the ultimate responsibility. So we're like I said, we're going in one direction right now, and it needs to change. We need to be far more attacking. We need to, in my opinion, we need to play 3 across the midfield. We need to start really blocking out that midfield now and getting possession and getting on the ball, because we just give possession away so easily. I mean, we talked about it yesterday. When we had that 2 banks of 4, all it took was one pass from Chelsea. They didn't have to show their abilities. Ziyech didn't have to show his 40-50 million or however much they paid for him quality. It was one pass. Anyone could have played that pass on the pitch, and it broke through 5 or 6 players every single time. That's not good enough. It's not good enough. And even when we did defend and we got the ball out, we played so deep that they had the absolute pick of the ball before they then came in and attacked again. It was just a boring, uninspiring performance. And you look at the players. I mean, we've talked about Miguel Miron and how unhappy he looks, but you look at them all. St. Maximin hasn't been as active on social media recently, hasn't been interactive as much with the players, because let's face it, he's probably not happy right now, and he looks like it on the pitch. Hayden, fair enough, he comes out and talks and sort of leads the dressing room, but even then, he doesn't look happy on the pitch. None of them do. And why is that? Because they're playing football that they don't want to play. They're playing football that's so uninspiring. As a professional footballer, if you've got anything about you, right, you would be wanting to get out right now. You'd be doing anything to get out of this club, not because you dislike the club, not because you dislike the city, but because you dislike the style of football you're playing, and you don't see your career going in the direction that you want it to. And you know what? I don't blame them. I do not blame them one iota. So the book stops with Bruce, 100%. And honestly, if he doesn't win against Palace, there should be serious questions at the top of this club, right, going on Friday night saying, what direction are we going in? What's happening right now? And there should be serious questions. I know people are saying he won't get sacked, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, we've got 5 games now up until Christmas that we could be winning. Every single one of them, they are winnable games, right? If we don't win at least 3 of those 5 games, we're in serious trouble going into the second half of the season. We should be on at least 20 points. Okay, at least 20 points going into the new year. If we're not, it is not acceptable. And we are going to be right in the thick of a relegation battle, more than we ever have before in the last 4 years.
Lots of great points coming in. Life goals going a little bit going a bit crazy here with the suggestion of Andy Carroll becoming manager. Well, I mean, he's no centre forward at the moment, that's for certain. And saying he comes in as a manager and basically retires as a player when January comes, I'm not sure that would be greeted with open arms. But we've all got suggestions, we've all got opinions. Nathan, what is yours?
Yeah, I think as Pete said, those games, the run of games that we've got coming up to Christmas, they're some really winnable games in there. Like Palace are playing well at the moment. They've got a lot of sort of tools and that they could hurt us with. I feel like coming into next week, I felt we're going to come unstuck again next week. I don't see. They are winnable games, but I don't see in the way that we're playing at the moment, I don't see us getting any points at all from some of those games, to be honest with you. Because if we play like we did do last week, this week, or the week or the previous week before the international break, then we simply don't have anything at all to suggest that there's any points coming from anywhere at the moment. And that's literally how grim it is. I think yesterday it shows the amount the character of Bruce in the way that he makes excuses. Obviously, we've all raised that, he makes excuses time and time again. But he was saying yesterday, he said that straight after the game, when you play that kind of system that we played, you're always going to get pushed back, and you're always going to get your space limited, and you're going to be limited in opportunities. But what we're forgetting is that he's saying that, but he's the one who picks that system. He's the one who chose that system. So you can't then blame that system for the shortcomings in your performance. But yeah, I think, to be honest, if you look at so far, if you look beyond this season, if you look at 2020 as a whole, there's been 27 Premier League games in the whole of 2020. We've won 7 of them, and that's not good enough, is it? That's relegation form, really. And the manner in which we go down, it's not as if I could sit by and watch if we were perhaps, like playing well and really giving these games a go, but ended up not coming away with the result. Look at the way Leeds are playing; they throw everything in the kitchen sink at these games, and they've taken some hardings this season. But the way that they're playing, they're going to win games by just being that positive and being that attacking, and that's something that I'm not saying I'd want us to play free-flowing football and go down, but what's the alternative? At the minute, we're not playing any type of football. There's no identity to the way we're playing. There's no sort of any sort of style or anything that you can kind of identify with. I thought yesterday, I think what Bruce says to the media, I think people were saying yesterday that BT Sport had us down as a 3-4-3, but the reality is that's just being overly optimistic. It's a flat back 5. We're not playing a back 5 in the way that a lot of these other sort of more well-rounded footballing teams play a back 5 with 3 at the back and wing backs that are pushing on and actually doing things. The way that we play is it's a flat back 5 almost, because the wing backs are pushed back so much. Our centre halves looked really flat-footed yesterday. I thought they were second to everything. For the first goal, Fernandez, who's usually a good performer for me, he was just caught in no man's land, wasn't he? He was caught with his back away from goal, facing the goal, and he just got himself in a mess. And that was similar to the first goal that we conceded at Southampton. It was the defender, I can't remember who it was now, but he was just caught in a really bad position with his facing goal. As I said, our wing backs are pushed so far back that they're not wing backs anymore. They're just a right back and a left back. I did say again that our centre midfield would be a crucial part to the performance yesterday, and we were overrun and outclassed massively in centre midfield yesterday, and which is disappointing because Longstaff and Hayden, when they want to, they've got a game in them. We've seen Hayden pull out performances that could rival any sort of defensive box-to-box midfielder in the league sometimes when he wants to, but that wasn't there yesterday. Our wingers are redundant. They're not really involved. Save for a few runs from St. Maximum yesterday, where he managed to do a few bits, but they ultimately came to nothing because of poor decision making. And time again, whoever it appears to be that's playing up front for us is just completely isolated. They're completely out of the picture. They're not in the game at all. And I think the reason that we've got away with it at times this season is purely down to Callum Wilson's sort of instinct and intelligence when it comes to running the line, because he manages to create some opportunities for himself out of literally nothing. I think the few times that he has had chances, luckily that he's a really good finisher and he tends to put them away, but his chances are few and far between in every single game. I think under Rafa, when we had this sort of similar system of having three at the back and wing backs, we always looked like we could do something on the counter attack. As Andre said, we always used to break really quickly. We'd get forward and we'd create an opportunity and we'd catch teams out, and that's because we utilised the wingers that we had. We had Perez and Almiron who would run that ball up the pitch for us and get it to Rondon, who was certain he was going to score for us. But it seems like we're playing a similar formation, but without any of that forward threat at all. So it just seems really, I don't know where we go from here really, other than a change of manager. I can't see any other way forward. I think that if it was any other team, if there wasn't all this, I don't know if this takeover stuff going on in the background is hindering us in a way that it's making the people at the top not want to make decisions, and there's a sort of paralysis at that top level that's stopping them from making those decisions. Because I think that if it was an owner that was in for the long haul and that was looking at growing this team and building it, then Bruce wouldn't be manager.
Yeah, Rafa Benitez has got, I think he sent me these on Twitter earlier on. It's 5 losses at home in the last 7 home games. We only scored 1 goal in open play in the last 5 games. 7 points down on the same fixtures as last season. Bottom 3, 4 points since behind closed doors. Not a good sign, Samantha. And surprisingly, this season, no comparisons between Steve Bruce and Rafa.
Well, there's no comparison to me. I mean, it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And he came out yesterday, I read certain bits and pieces, and he said there was a lot to like about our second half performance. And I was thinking, Jesus, was I in a paralysis from the first half and somehow missed it? And I just thought, you know what? Kendall tweeted it yesterday. He is stealing a living. He's getting absolutely no crap because nobody's in the stadium and there's lockdown and people can't be out protesting, and then he can just, chalk everything else off as keyboard warriors. The football is pathetic. Yes, the players do need to shoulder some responsibility because ultimately they're well played and they're supposed to be passionate about this sport, and they don't look in any way happy. I thought Alan Shearer's comment on Lascelles yesterday was, shots fired for the first time at the captain, which we've been talking about more and more week on week. What is he bringing? And the fact that, we are so unbalanced as a team, the fact that it appears that he is screaming at our midfield to come back and support. How many players do you need defending? Give yourself a shake and take some bloody responsibility, because we're never going to get up the pitch if the captain is telling people to come back and help them do their job. They're supposed to be Premier League footballers. They're always out of position. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. You look at that graphic that you showed, and I see Jamal Lewis getting absolutely hammered on Twitter, and it's really pissing me off because I'm a Northern Ireland fan, and I actually think he's a good defender. But you look at that balance of our squad and how we're set up to the right. I mean, what chance does the guy have? If I'm a manager and I'm watching matches of ours, I said it on Twitter yesterday, I would absolutely target us down the left, because St. Maximum's not coming back. He's not tracking back. And Lewis is just being left. Now, he's a young player that's still improving. But look at that setup. And that's game after game after game that he just can't set us up in a way that isn't easy for other teams to exploit. And that's defensively. We're playing this 3-4-3, 5-2-2-1. Anyone plays wherever they want, but it's not effective. We can't defend. And if somebody was to say to me, how do you fix it? Well, I struggle because it comes down to coaching. And I've heard a lot of rumours about what Steve Bruce actually does on the coaching field, and it doesn't seem like a lot. So for me, if he wants to keep his job, which I don't think he deserves, but he's not sure how to change things with who he has in his coaching staff, then he needs to get somebody else in that's going to give him a glimmer of tactical awareness of how the game is at the minute, because that group, maybe they're too close to it, maybe they're devoid of ideas, it's not working. And if he loves the club and wants the job, then he needs to take a really good hard look at the setup that he's got and decide if it's right or if he needs to go and ask for some more help, because we're the worst team by far in terms of football. You know, you can throw all the stats out there, and you can maybe give an honourable mention to West Brom and Fulham, but they just came up and they're still finding their feet. Whereas we are not, and we're not in transition. It's not a project. We could be saying it's a project in 3 years, but there's a real chance that we will start to drift. And the frustration for me, and I'd love to know how Steve Bruce feels about it, is when you look at the next 5 games, which ones of those does he think are winnable? Because I would ultimately say Fulham and West Brom, because they're promoted teams. I don't see us getting anything against Palace because they're set up better. They know how to defend, although it frustrates their fans. But they have Zaha. They have those 1 or 2 players that really turn up. Apart from Callum Wilson in our attack, nobody else is really turning up. St. Maximum has been awful. He's been really poor, verging on pathetic as well. He's not talking on social media. So there's, you know, he's not putting the shift in. Almiron, Bruce has an issue with. He came on yesterday, he looked like one of the most lively players. You know, there's lots of problems there. And I just don't see how he's going to fix them. Rafa talked about the short blanket. I mean, it's a baby's blanket at the minute because nobody's doing their job. And unless the one thing he needs to do is somehow defensively tighten us up, because I can see us getting a couple more hide-ins. But I don't think Mike Ashley's going to fire him. I just don't see it unless we go into the bottom 3 and it looks more so like the players. He's lost the players. I think someone put a comment up saying Fernandez wouldn't take the captain's armband when Lascelles went off. I didn't see that, but if that's the case, that's real signs of trouble.
Yeah, and talking about our rivals, Fulham have managed to claw another goal back after just missing a penalty. So it's currently Fulham 2, Everton 3. Everton were way ahead there, 3-1 up and cruising, but Fulham making a fight of it. And it's something which we don't see Newcastle do, Al-Walid, which is the reason we're having this show today. Newcastle bereft of ideas, seem clueless with tactics. The map that I showed from BBC's Match of the Day last night is clear to see that the players are all just huddled together in the middle and no idea what they're doing. It's not great. And I suppose my 2 questions to you would be, you know, do you feel as a Newcastle fan that Steve Bruce should be either resigning or sacked? And how do you think PIF will be viewing this? Because potentially they could be taking Newcastle United over, and you know they will be having one look on this and thinking, you know, are the team secure in the Premier League?
I think there is 1 more month maybe, and coming month things will be changed. It's depend on the result and the few next games. Actually, I really want to look at Mike Ashley face expression when he hear Andre's stats.
Bring him up.
And I want to ask him. Are you happy with this? Because as we saw yesterday, nothing new regarding Steve Bruce. Very expectable to other managers, because basically he do nothing. I noticed the team do better when they score, which is rarely, but when they score, they do better usually. So I don't know why we didn't see we didn't see proper attacking. Yani Steve Bruce should know that if he attack and try to score, but this is the problem. We didn't see that they try to score at the first game. We noticed other teams. We always lately we concede early goal, which this is a big question. Why is that? Since we have 5 at the back, for example, as we see. We have Saint Maximin, good player, Almiron, Fraser, Wilson. He must put them all together. If you have no tactic, okay, fine. Just play it simple. Put the best put the best player in the field, and that's it. I think after 1 month, the picture will become more clear. And if you please, can you just repeat the second question regarding PIF?
Yeah, PIF. I mean, what would you say they must be feeling? Because, you know, if you're looking to buy a football club in England, we know now that they're still very much at the table. It's all in the hands of lawyers, QCs, solicitors. Mike Ashley, fans consortium are all doing their best, all batting on the same side, as we would say in the UK. It all looks very promising, but PIF must have concerns, I would say, because if this team, you know, does continue in this form, then they will slip. I think the Rafa post there earlier on was, you know, we could be 15th if Leeds get something today. And, you know, Newcastle then fall into the bottom 3 if they don't get points from the next 5 games. Will PIF still value the club at, you know, 320 million or whatever it is?
I'm assuming they are very worried. But I think maybe the consortium, and in conclusion, the consortium, I think they talk to Mike Ashley, and they have agenda regarding coach. I suppose in my mind, I think Mike Ashley said, let's see, next coming 3 or 4 games, we will decide then. And I think they are, of course, he have to protect his assets. I think they have maybe hidden talk with the next manager, maybe. And just to take the lead after they sack Bruce, because they have to think about who's coming.
Rafa Benitez is obviously somebody who has got a great association with the club, and you know, talked about the project. You know, has an affinity with the supporters. Of course, he was brought in too late when he first came to the club, and you know, ultimately was the overseer of a Newcastle relegation, but got us back up at the first time of asking. Chris, managerial prospect if Steve Bruce does go, and we need to be realistic here because we have to look at the takeover situation. You know, who are we going to be able to bring in if the takeover is still dragging on? If Newcastle's players are, you know, looking for somebody for inspiration, who do you think we're going to bring in? I'm not in the Eddie Howe fan club here. I don't see that being a good selection. He's coming off the back of a relegation. You need somebody who can inspire the supporters, albeit whilst they're outside of the ground. But you also need somebody who's going to, you know, inspire the players. Somebody who can come in, coach, get the players focused, get the players performing, and get the points to keep us in the Premier League.
Yeah, I don't think even if Rafa Benitez is Staveley's number 1 choice for a post takeover hire, he's not going to come in after Bruce if there's no takeover yet. So I would look for somebody like Claudio Ranieri, you know, still like a veteran, old, proven manager. Unlike Steve Bruce is a veteran, old, proven manager, just gets sacked everywhere. So yeah, I would look for somebody like Ranieri to be like the interim holdover until there's clarity on the takeover, and then, you know, if there's no clarity on the takeover by the end of the year, then they could hire a more permanent manager. But yeah, if Steve Bruce gets the sack, someone like Ranieri, I don't think it will be. Oh God, drawing the blank on the other manager. Yeah, I don't see any English managers coming in to replace Bruce. So yes, someone like Ranieri.
What do you think about Bruce's comments about the supporters and the fallout that he's had with Almiron's agent, which of course dragged on last night with Rojas coming back out and having a pop at Steve Bruce? That kind of thing isn't helpful, I'm sure either. But what's your views on the fact that there'll always be grumbles, which is what he said last night?
If there's anything that could be worse than Steve Bruce as a manager, it's how he deals with public relations. I think he's shambles in how to deal with the media. He's self-serving. Always gonna cover his ass. But it's never his fault. It's always a work in progress, and all those cliches that he wants to use instead of say like it's not me, it's the players. It's never his fault. Well, look at his record. I mean, it speaks for itself. Put it that.
Okay, Andre, same questions to you. Who do you bring in short term if there's no takeover? And, is there anybody likely to want the job? I remember speaking to Supermac a few weeks back and he said, plenty of managers would want to take it. You never know where it could lead. What do you make about his comments to the support, about the supporters grumbling? There's always grumbles, and he's fallout with Almiron's agent.
Well, I think that personally I like Eddie Howe, and I think Eddie Howe is a good option. But as you mentioned, he just got relegated, so I don't know if this will be a straightforward pick. But honestly, the thing is that there are people whose job is exactly this one. Yeah, me and you are not paid to do this, while Lee Charnley gets a very, very good salary or wage per week in order to take decisions like this. And what I'm optimistic about is that 4 years ago, when Newcastle were actually in a worse position table-wise and points-wise, they brought in Rafa Benitez, who at the time was the previous Real Madrid manager, and they managed to attract him to Newcastle. So I think that Ashley can be a very, very good negotiator when the target is identified and he needs to go there and actually sell him the club and sell him the job. Similarly, he attracted Kevin Keegan back in 2008. So I think that if they identify the right profile, Ashley can bring him to Newcastle, because everybody knows that Newcastle is a great, great place to be. It's a club with huge potential, and Rafa Benitez found this out, and I guess this is why he took the job. If they could bring Rafa Benitez after Real Madrid to Newcastle, I believe that they can bring many people. And I think that, I don't know the full football landscape. Of course, it's not my job. But see, Southampton brought Ralf Hasenhüttl from Germany. For the last 1 year, Southampton in isolation, when you take the November to November standing, Southampton are third or fourth in the Premier League. And they are one of the best pressing sides in the Premier League. So out of the window goes the question that only the big boys can fight. And if you find a good manager, you build a good team. Marcelo Bielsa, Leeds managed to attract Marcelo Bielsa, who's he's the mentor of Pep Guardiola in terms of management and coaching. So Bielsa spent already more than 2 years in Leeds, building a terrific playing side. Dean Smith, when he was at Brentford, like Brentford were known as the entertainers in the Championship, Aston Villa actually identified him, took him to replace Steve Bruce, by the way, and you see what Dean Smith is doing in terms of style at Aston Villa. I'm not a big fan of Aston Villa, but they destroyed Liverpool with 7 goals, playing terrific football. So I think that the people in charge, they need to know the football landscape. They need to identify the right person out there, and they shouldn't limit themselves to the names that are usually mentioned. I'm sure there are great young coaches in Spain, in Germany, even in England in the lower divisions. They need to find the right profile and bring him to the club, but things cannot go on the way they are today. And for the second question, look, Steve Bruce, I think he's kind of bitter since the start because he was not well accepted by the fans. And, as somebody mentioned, he wasn't first choice. He was like 7 for 8 choice. I know that Mikel Arteta turned Newcastle down. Patrick Vieira turned Newcastle down. Some our guys came out and said they approached me, but I turned them down. So basically, Steve Bruce knew that he was not accepted very well from the start. And he has this sort of bitterness, I would say. And at times when things are not going well, he kind of, takes it against the fans. Generally, I like Steve Bruce as a guy. He seems like a very, very nice guy outside of football and his job. And honestly, I wish him all the best in life and in the future. But I don't think that he's the man to take Newcastle forward, and he needs to go.
A lot of suggestions. Lee Clark is one. Local lad. Steve Harper's on the books at the club, of course. Peter Ramage is there. I've got to be honest. I would put a lot of them in charge and maybe get them to work it between them, and rather than have Steve Bruce at this current moment in time. Daz, your views on those questions that I've asked the lads. Obviously, talking just a little bit about Bruce's comments about the supporters, and some of his PR, which Chris has quite rightly said, is laughable at times and cringeworthy as a Newcastle fan. Making excuses about Chelsea, going on TV before the game yesterday and more or less, saying we're up against it, we have got a chance. I mean, that kind of thing can't rub off on the players in a positive manner, can it?
No, and like, I just again watch before I come on the 5-minute match of the day highlights, and yeah, I could just imagine him when he's shaking hands with Frank Lampard at the start, saying, "Congratulations, just leave it at 2-0 first. We'd be happy with that before the game even starts." But just who we actually bring in, I don't have any one name. I don't have faith in Lee Charney to go out and find the next whiz kid manager that could change it all up and bring something special to Newcastle. This is assuming that there's no takeover at the moment of where we are now. I think I'm sick of the nice guy. Steve Bruce is a nice guy, but you can't be a nice guy and be a football manager. You have to be a bit ruthless as well. We need someone that's hungry, and I mean hungry for success, not anything else. And I think for let me see, if I was going to bring in someone realistic, like you could say, you can list off loads of managers that are available, like the Pochettino or whatever, but you're not going to get them where we are now, with the situation we're in. I'm thinking someone that will give the players a good kick up the hole if they need it. Someone like Nigel Pearson, like he's been there before at Newcastle. Look, he's not my favorite manager or anything like that, but someone that's going to lay into them and get them performing. Like we need something now. We need some spark. We play the difficult teams. These are games that are potentially winnable. We need someone. I know Ashley is going to change it. We need something to kickstart us now.
Yeah, I mean, lots of suggestions coming in. We've seen a few of the same old faces and names over the last few weeks. Lee Clark's getting a few. Pardew, Steven Gerrard, Pearson's been mentioned. Pochettino would be great after the takeover, says Steve. Stu says Michael O'Neill, ex-Newcastle player. A lot of people say Gerrard, but I mean, again, Colin Wilson's right. It is a hot potato, Pete, and not really something that not something that somebody would really want unless they were, especially under Mike Ashley. But yeah, but we're talking about Steve Bruce today. His comments, essentially about the fans and about the team, etc. What do you make of his whole demeanour when he's talking to the press and the cameras?
I'll be honest, I don't listen to them because they're just the same comments every week, and they're boring. So honestly, when the game finishes, I switch it off. I have no interest in what he has to say. I have no interest in the comments that he makes because it's all a load of rubbish. It's all to basically just play everything down. That's what he wants to do. He wants to play everything down because ultimately he wants to stay in this job as long as possible. He will scratch and claw and do whatever he can to stay in this job for as long as he possibly can. The reason being, he will never get another Premier League job. This is his last Premier League job, and he knows it. He knows he's so fortunate to be a Premier League manager right now that he will do whatever he can to stay in the job. So he will do and he'll say anything he possibly can to get pundits and all the rest of it and people on side to keep him in a job. He knows for a fact if the fans were in the stadium, if we were going to the stadium every single week, he'd have been out by now. Because we would have protested so much that Mike Ashley would have had to react. He would have been gone. It's as simple as that. So, I don't care what he says. I have no interest in what he says, whether we win, lose, or draw, because it's the same rubbish. It's already we've already had Newcastle fans on social media come out, and some of the comments that he said those same comments at every other club he's been at. So he literally regurgitates the same comments and the same things for the same situations that he's been in. It's as if he's got a notebook and he just writes it down and he says, "Oh, okay, what comment should I say today, based on what result we get?" And it's all planned. It's just it's a joke. So I don't listen to anything that he's got to say. Going on to who I would have in instead of Bruce. I think Andre made a really good point on both sides of things. You wouldn't want to just stick to one particular manager. There are lots of managers out there, and the issue is that the managers that we would want to consider, who would want to come and work for Mike Ashley? Who would want to come and work with Lee Charnley? They've seen in the media, okay, how they treat the club, how they treat their previous managers, how the managers are just left to get on with it, how they're not backed in the transfer window, that they're literally given players rather than being able to sign. I mean, Andre talked about Hassan Hutel. He's a fantastic manager. He would have never come to us. He would go to Brighton, Southampton, Bournemouth. He'd go to all those teams that are considered lesser, smaller clubs than us way before he chose Newcastle. Why? Because he wouldn't want to work under Mike Ashley. He wouldn't want to work under those restrictions for a chunk of his managerial career. Because if you're coming into a club, you want to know that you're buying your players, that you're selecting the players that you want for your team to play your style. You don't want to be given a Joe Linton at 40 million, who's a bag of rocks. You don't want a player like that coming into your club when he doesn't fit into your style whatsoever. So for me, right now, there's only one choice to take over this club. Some have already said they disagree with it. You've said yourself, Steve, you don't particularly rate him. But Eddie Howe, for me, is the only one that can come in right now in this predicament, in this situation, and make our team better. We can talk about, the fact that you got relegated. Fair enough. I don't think that's an issue, personally. I think he completed his cycle at Bournemouth. I think a lot of the players, particularly in defence, had got a little bit too old and a little bit past their best. And I think it was highlighted. I think him coming in at Newcastle would certainly get the likes of Wilson and Fraser and one or two others excited again. Why? Because he plays attacking football. And that's what we're lacking right now. We're lacking an attacking mentality. We're not conceding massive amounts of goals like your Fulhams and your Sheffield Uniteds or whatever. We're not conceding a huge amount of goals. We're just lacking an attacking emphasis. And he would bring that to us. And he's already worked with the likes of Wilson and Fraser. I mean, I don't think there'd be an issue with him working with Fraser personally, but he's already got experience working with those guys. He knows their strengths. He knows how to get them playing. And I don't think it would take him very long to get us actually playing attacking football. Now, you throw in Miguel Almiron, you throw in St. Maximum into that attacking mentality, and you've got goals in that team. And you've already seen under Eddie Howe in previous seasons that he's beat some of the better teams in the Premier League playing that attacking style. And he's beat some of the lower teams playing that attacking style. But he hasn't had the ammunition that we've got in our squad. And I'll go back to the point. There are no excuses. We've got the players to cause teams a lot of problems. The problem is the manager. The manager doesn't know how to put this system and this squad of players together to make it effective. For me, Eddie Howe is the one that could do that, whether it's on a short-term contract or not. If it's till the end of the season and seeing how this takeover pans out, so be it. We're not talking about 4 or 5 year plan. We're talking about him coming in and impacting the club and really stamping his authority down to get us up the table and get us playing good football and winning games. He would be hungry to come into us right now. It'd be the biggest club that he's ever managed. He'd be hungry to really kickstart his career again because it took a little bit of a bump with him getting relegated. But for me, it's a no-brainer. Get him in now while we can and get him in a position where we've got 4 or 5 winnable games where he could get us and really hit the ground running. It's the perfect opportunity to make the change right now.
Well, good points, Pete. As always, you're looking as laid back as ASM did yesterday, mate. I know it's Sunday night yesterday. Chilling out.
It's a
chilling
Sunday.
Out there.
It's a Sunday. Look, it's my chill day. I've got to enjoy it.
Excellent, mate. Newworkwear.com, specialists in the supply and branding of clothing for the workplace, are our sponsors for this month, and they pay for the StreamYard application. And big thank you to them. And also a big thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Newcastle. And they also make our NewcastleLegends.com t-shirts, NUFC Matters t-shirts. Get them from newcastlelegends.com. And the cups as well, which of course Daz is modelling, as always, $9.99 for those. And we also have the calendar, which we are doing for the food bank. Get that from newcastlelegends.com as well. They're all proceeds going to the food bank from them. And tomorrow night, we will be announcing the winner of the NUFC Matters Liam Kennedy Join the Dots t-shirt. It's currently, I think, at £75. If you just get onto my Twitter at Steve Wraith, it's pinned to the top. Just place your bid underneath. And again, all the money from that is going to the food bank. Samantha, and sorry, Nathan, over to you, mate. Just want to, a lot of suggestions there for manager. You'll have seen them coming up on the screen. What did you make of Pete's, views on Eddie Howe? For me, I would prefer Rafa to come back. I prefer Mike Ashley to give complete control to Rafa. I'd like to think that the potential new buyers would speak to Mike Ashley, and they're obviously in communication throughout this whole proceed and try and get Rafa to come back, give him complete control and let him do the job. But, Eddie Howe is Pete's suggestion, and he's put a pretty good case forward for Eddie Howe, to be fair.
Yeah, I think as far as Rafa's concerned, I can't see him, even if there was any sort of dialogue between current owners and potential new owners, I can't see Rafa coming back under this regime, even if there was that promise of complete control. Because I think from Rafa's point of view, there was always that the reason he ever stayed on with us, after the first season, and it will have been because there was talks of a takeover happening, and he would have stayed on a promise of there being a better future in better owners. I would assume. I think that was probably part of his decision. I don't think he'd take the job now with a view to there being a potential takeover, because we've seen all the ups and downs that have been played out in public around this takeover, and none of us really know if it's ever going to happen, or there's going to be even more bumps in the road. I would assume before anything never gets signed off. So I don't think it's. Although I would love him to come back, I don't think he would ever take that job at this moment in time, given that complete control. I think you look at, for me, the managers fall into like sort of three distinct categories of where we're at right now. We've got the sort of dream managers that we've all talked about, like Pochettino, Rafa coming back, those types of managers that would only be sort of really achievable if and when a takeover goes through. It does seem sort of baffling that Pochettino is still out of a job. I think that probably maybe speaks to the fact that maybe consortium have been in touch. Who knows? I think, maybe he's waiting for that Man United job. Who knows about that one? But there's those kind of managers, like you look at it. What a manager I really like the look of was Quique Setien, that was at Barcelona. I think what he did before he was at Barcelona, when he was at Betis, he transformed them into a really good side in his. I think he was there three maybe 4 years. But yeah, I think those are the types of managers that we'd only look at if a takeover goes through. I think the next group of managers you've got is the kind of stopgap managers that people have mentioned, like the likes of Nigel Pearson, that kind of thing. I don't think he's a terrible shout. I'd rather have Nigel Pearson in right now than Steve Bruce. Absolutely, I think he'd give all those players a rocket up their arse. I think he was really unfortunate to get sacked in his last job. I think they ended up going down as a result of it. So I think he would be a great choice if we were to make a sort of knee-jerk change now to see us through to the end of the season and to see us through into what we would hope would be some sort of resolution on the takeover. I would have thought he would have probably been on that short list when we were looking at replacing when Steve Bruce got the job, because I think we had to reach so far down that list of managerial targets that he probably would have been on that list, and so it wouldn't surprise me that he didn't want to take that job. For me, the next sort of group of managers is like the likes of Eddie Howe and people have mentioned Gerrard. Managers who maybe perhaps interested in the job now, but would also be a good fit should there be a takeover, and that would transition quite well and be good managers for the future, if for the interim, but also when the takeover, if and when the takeover goes through. I think for Eddie Howe, like Pete mentioned, he kind of run his course at Bournemouth. I think what he did there was phenomenal over his tenure there, over his two tenures there. Sorry, I think he didn't have a very good time at Burnley, but I think he was so used to the sort of infrastructure and the way that Bournemouth was run, that he was always going to sort of not do quite well at Burnley. Any manager that goes in at Burnley has no money to spend ever. And I think what is the only thing that concerns me with Eddie Howe is that they spent a hell of a lot of money in his time at Bournemouth. And they weren't able to stave off relegation again. I don't know if that's a natural sort of progression of that team, and they, like Pete said, maybe that project run its course. But they spent a hell of a lot of money over the last couple of seasons at Bournemouth on quite a few of expensive defenders, quite a few really expensive young players from Liverpool who didn't really do anything for them. So it is quite concerning that he wasn't able to. But I think it was one season too many for them. I think they've kind of found their level. I think they were punching above the weight for quite a long time, but that's down to the credit of his management. For me, it would be Gerrard. I think we could. I'm sure we could get Gerrard away from Rangers. I don't think that he's what more can he do there? Obviously, he wants to sort of win the title there and stuff, but what's the point in winning that shit title up there? It doesn't mean anything, does it? It's just, the league is rubbish. So I'm sure we could pull him away from there. I think that. The issue that we've got is that as much as we loved Rafa's time here at Newcastle, he kind of blew the doors wide open and lifted the lid on the way that the club was run. Obviously, people were made aware of that when Keegan left the club, but since then we've had a string of kind of like yes men managers who have like just agreed with the regime and fell into line. So that controversy around Ashley kind of went away in the kind of managerial sphere, but Rafa blew the lid wide open on it, and he kind of exposed the way that the club's run. He exposed the sort of shortcomings. He talked about never being able to get in touch with these certain with the people that he needed to make a decision, that kind of stuff. So I think that any sort of self-respecting young and upcoming manager wouldn't really want to come to us. I'm a big fan of Andre's point, really, that looking to emulate what teams have done in getting these sort of next upcoming managers from the continent, from Germany, from that kind of thing. You see that the likes of they do it in Germany quite a lot. Like Dortmund have taken managers from low league teams, but managers who've showed promise and have showed like a forward thinking attitude to the game, and they've gone on look at Klopp and look at Thomas Tuchel and that kind of thing. I'd be a fan of doing something along those lines. But again, I think everyone's really well versed in how Newcastle are run now and the limitations that you get if you take that job under Ashley.
Yep, thanks for that, mate. On our Facebook page, NUFC Matters, it's a group. Paul Atkinson says to say that Steve Bruce worked under Sir Alex, well, he hasn't learned a thing about managing a football club. Owen Wright, and he says he's not learned anything as a defender either. He can't set a team up to keep a clean sheet. Paul Atkinson simply says he hasn't got a clue. Chris Marshall said, I would say there's some winnable games in our next 5 games, but I'm struggling to even think where the next points are coming from. Just on the way we're playing, it's all negative at the moment. Darren Lee Wells says, I can only think if Tesco bags Brom as a winnable game. And lots of good points coming on there. So join our Facebook group. Gareth Sewell says, flat back 4, 2 mobile centre midfielders. See Hayden and Longstaff, Fraser and ASM wide with Miggy behind Wilson. Don't play too deep, but attack with pace. Each player should know their position, and all they need to do as well is give 100%. Good point on what he would do to get this team playing. And Brian Henderson says, what happens if he gets at least 3 wins from them, from these 5 games? Will you still moan? There's always somebody with the opposite view, and we're always happy to put alternative views out there. Samantha, I've seen a suggestion for Katie to get the managerial job just because she'd swear at all the players and get them motivated. But joking aside, your suggestions for an interim manager?
Yeah, I think we need to think of it as an interim manager. I mean, we could all throw out these names that we think would be 100 times better than Steve Bruce. And we also need to remember that Mike Ashley has a scale of between Joe Kinnear and Rafa Benitez. So we could get anything in between that. I honestly think it depends what mood he wakes up in the morning is what the fate of our club is going to be like for the next X amount of time. For me, same as Daz, I'm Nigel Pearson. I don't like the guy. I would never have said it until the point of Steve Bruce. But I think he did well for Watford. I think he would ruffle feathers. I think the players need to rocket up their backside because they might be getting set up badly, but that doesn't excuse a lot of the efforts that are being put in. Eddie Howe wouldn't be the guy for me either, especially as an interim coach. I joked on Twitter about Alan Pardew, because he would get the team playing attacking football. I don't like him; he's an absolute arsehole, but he would get that team playing because he has had good performances. So I think it's about the personality that we bring in now with that mix of players. I absolutely think there is a split in the squad, and that's why we need to be really careful about who we bring in. I think Bruce is as weak as water. I see absolutely no point to him, and his coaching staff do most of the work, and they're pretty shit as well. So, if it's me, it's Nigel Pearson, but I think someone commented that there's been an article in the Telegraph saying that Mike Ashley's supporting Bruce. That's not a surprise. And to the comment about what if we get 3 wins in the next 5 games, we all support the club. We want the club to do well. We want the team to win games. So we would celebrate that, because that's ultimately what we want. Doesn't mean that Bruce is any better a manager. If it was fluke wins, good wins, it doesn't matter, because none of us want the club to be relegated. We're not those fans that say, well, I hope we get beat for the next 10 games so that he'll get sacked. That's not what we want for our club. But we do want to see better, and better for me isn't Steve Bruce. But I think it's very slim pickings who would want to come into the club. And that's why I think it'll be a very short list, and it'll be a personality that fits Mike and Lee Charnley, who I also think is useless.
Big thanks to Steve Bruce for joining the show. He says he'd recommend Tony Pulis, and also says the squad is poor and it's a lack of spine and too much naivety. Thanks, Steve, for your input, a bit more than you give in the dressing room. Al Walid, finally to you, mate. Obviously, the aftermath of yesterday's game has got everybody very emotional, but this has been going on for months now. People are sick and tired of Steve Bruce and what is going on. A lot of people talking about his PR. Chris pointed it out. It's one of his worst traits. He's not very good being interviewed, and a lot of people didn't want him in the job in the first place, me included. It has to be said. Where do we go from here? Who would you like to see come in? Life Goals has put a little list there together. Level 1 manager, Kennedy, Holloway, McLaren or Warnock. Level 2, Sam Allardyce, Alan Pardew or Tony Pulis. Level 3, Howe, Gerrard. Level 4, Rafa or Pochettino. Level 5, Alex Ferguson returns. Nigel Pearson, not many people have jumped in on that one and said that it's a bad idea. And you normally see that on the chat. When one of our panel says something, somebody will jump in. Daz came up with it. Samantha's backed it. I've got to be honest, Nigel Pearson has a good record for getting people out of relegation positions. What would you say, Al Walid? Who would you bring in as an interim manager?
I would wish, if I have to wish, I wish if Sir Ferguson will come back.
What?
But actually, the question is, Mike Ashley, is he feeling in danger yet or not? Because I suppose there is a list of manager he will bring replacing Steve Bruce, but I think this list have 2 categories. Either someone in love with the club, he will say yes without no conditions, because any manager will come right now, he will consider, okay, what if I take the job now? What about after the takeover, if it's happened or if it's not? So any coach will come now, he will feel it's temporarily. Second category is someone seeking any opportunity, no matter what, to coach. And usually these young coaches, like what you are guys saying, like for example Gerrard or anyone. Last thing, when you have to pick any manager, you have to take someone you trust, someone you see him coaching in short period, in long period of time. You see him in difficult times, difficult games, running their clubs. Rafa, for last point for Rafa, I think he will come after the takeover.
Okay, good stuff. Well, listen, guys and girls, Samantha, thanks for coming on and taking up a little bit of your Sunday afternoon. We can't do anything about it. All we can do is help you. We'll get a bit of therapy on a Sunday afternoon and talk about it. Of course, I will be back tomorrow evening with Samantha and the rest of the girls for ladies' night. We will be on at 7:30, and again we will be looking back at the weekend's fixture and talking about what Mike Ashley's going to do over the next few weeks, and plenty to talk about as always. And with the takeover, of course, seeming to be getting a little bit more imminent. There's things change day to day, so it should be an interesting show. As always, we're going to promote the Phone a Friend campaign, which we've promised to promote all the way through November. If you want to call a family member or friend that you haven't spoken to for a while, it does make a difference. Make sure you pick up the phone and speak to somebody you haven't spoken to for a while. And as I say, that is our campaign for the month of November. As I said, guys, thanks very much for coming on. Been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to speaking to you later on in the week. Take care.
Cheers.